Day MC.
Well, it's good to have you back on Global Morning. This discussion segment, we have a lot to talk about, of course. And like we mentioned, the new media is taking over, basically, in terms of perception and all of that. But we want to find out, what kind of news do you consume? Because with the trend of the new media, we have what we call the citizen journalism right now playing out. And so I always tell people, advise people, when you hear information, try and verify, try and find the source. So it guides your perception of what you're consuming, because news consumption has become a major concern where incidents happen. That amazes me a lot of time when I see tragic point of view where an accident happens or something chaotic happens. The next thing you see is people bringing up their phones and they're filming, and they start spreading it without finding out the real cause or the challenges or what resulted to that thing that played out at some point. All they want to do is just send information out. So the question we're going to be asking, basically, before our guests will join us in the conversation, is how is information shaping public perception today? Because we need to ask these questions. We need to understand where to draw the line, where to know what is actually true or false. And Mukhtar, of course, what's your perception basically when it comes to consumption of information? You are a media expert, so what's your take basically on that?
I don't know if I'm an expert, but of course I try. But I'm speaking from my own point of view.
Yeah.
Like you've said, the way we consume news is very dynamic, especially with the advent of social media, where we have people become citizen journalists, where they are also able to be part of the process. But it also comes with challenges, because we have things like misinformation, disinformation, and fake news, all part of it. And sensationalism has also been something that has taken over the airwaves. You see, people are sending things without verifying how factual they are. So those are really things that have come with the advent of the new media, and that's why it's very important for our audience to be able to know how they consume and what they consume actually.
Well, with that being said, basically, it turns our focus to really understand all the questions, all the concerns. And because, like we said, in today's fast-paced digital world, the way we consume news is evolving rapidly. Well, we have from traditional media platforms to social media, and also to instant messaging, information, and also now travels faster than ever before. A whole lot of questions have been asked, but with that speed comes important questions around credibility, misinformation, and trust. And of course, it also feels like everyone is now a source of information. Like I mentioned, everyone is giving their bits and telling you what's happening without even verifying what it's really saying. Misinformation is a concern, of course. Like Mutara mentioned, misinformation has become a concern where you are really worried when you hear things and you're asking, is that really what happened? And you turn to ask your next door, is that really what I heard? That becomes, and that's interesting thing, because as people are no longer consuming news, they are also just sharing, interpreting, and even influencing how others see it. Well, sometimes a single post online can shape public opinion before being verified, or the information is even verified, or even
especially
that comes
with conflicts
out.
like this, you see one post, and then people, before they verify, they act, and that is
they just act, and then that singular act becomes chaotic in the long run, when informations are not really properly sieved or filtered when people get to hear about. So we're asking a lot of questions. How is the new media shaping the way we receive and interpret information, and what does this mean for society, basically, Mokhtar?
Certainly.
Okay, so for joining us right now is our guest who will help us break this down. He's a senior research and programs fellow for Center for Media Policy and Accountability here in Abuja, in person of Mohammed ISAH bin Mohammed, who is live virtually all the way from Kogi. He'll be speaking to us, but we'll have him to join us virtually, and he will speak about this issue. We want him to break it down, make us understand what this shift is in terms of the consumption, in terms of the understanding of what citizens are doing today, and we will get a better picture, because he will break it down in terms of the accountability. People need to know that when you put out the wrong information, you'll be held accountable. It is high time where policies are being put out for people, or implementable policies in terms of telling people to know what to do, what dimension of sanctions, because people just think you can throw people, or you can put a wrong mindset of people to them, or get people to speak to issues that they're not even sure of, and it becomes a concern, it becomes troublesome, it becomes a problem to the next person on which you're saying this thing about. So we'll have a guest when he joins us virtually fully, because I'm told he's trying to set up himself. But let's talk about the bigger picture of this. How has the news consumption really changed in recent years? Basically, that's one question that's been getting answers. Like we said, the new media has its advantage, has its disadvantage, because we have the messaging platforms, we have all sort of platforms displayed for people to be able to communicate to loved ones, to friends. There are different associations where we have good bodies, where people also tend to share information and talk about issues. And our guest is standing by right now to speak to us on the perception, how the new media has really changed people's mindsets, and how maybe the government needs to put out penalties or measures to deal with corporates who put out wrong or misinformed information, and give people the wrong mindset and cause chaotic situations for the country, tearing down what is the right perception people should have, or the unity that people should have concerning issues, both from societal issues, both from something that has to do with economic value, that has to do with traditional norms. All of those questions are part of the things we'll have him to break it down to, because of course new media, like I said, has its own advantage and disadvantage. What's the basic take on that, basically?
Honestly, like you've said, and that's the challenge we face, because new media is good. It allows information to get to you as quick as possible. But the issue, like you've said, are we verifying what we consume? Are we really ready? So those are the questions that our guests would answer for us.
Okay, so basically, let's have our guest right now, who's standing by all the way from Kogi. It's good to have you join us on the program, Mohammed. How have you been? How is Kogi treating you this Easter Sunday?
Kogi is fine. The weather is okay. Thank you for having me.
About what's happening with the new media and the news consumption. You are an expert. You understand how this plays out. Let's start with the bigger picture. How has news consumption changed in recent years, and how would you say people today are they more interested in quick updates than in-depth reporting, basically?
To the 90s, right? Before we had anything, we would have to hear it from either the radio or the television, right? And we had very limited number of television stations. For instance, in Nigeria, most popular we had the NTA, and then later.
I see that he's having a bit of technical network glitches there, but while he's trying to put up his thoughts and get back to us, Mukhtar, you've heard our guest. He was just speaking about the traditional media, where back in the days we had limited television stations where people wanted to tune into the radio, or the television to be sure, pick up a copy of the paper and get verified information. But with the new media today, people really rely on chats. Shared information, forwarded as received. So when you see a forwarded message, for me, when I see forwarded message, I take my time to consume and be sure of what that is before I just digest, and then look for verified sources to balance. That's because I have a better understanding
of course, because you're an expert.
So for those who don't have that understanding, so how do we deal with those issues because of the news consumption?
Well, like he said, let's look at the traditional media, because they are sources that we have seen that are trusted, most of them, even though of course we also have issues with a piece of misinformation, even with the traditional media.
Yeah.
But we have typically seen that over time, there are people who have been trusted. So before you are able to consume every element that you see, you look at how factual is it, where is it coming from? Because every story would have a source, every story would have a channel of communication. So is it passing through the right channels? And with the advent of AI, it's even becoming more difficult because we see that things are just made to look like real when they are not. So you have to be circumspect when consuming news and consuming information, especially in this digital age, and you have to verify. And then sharing again is also a responsibility, because before you share, you ask yourself, is it true? Is it even, what's the value of this news I'm sharing? Because sometimes you might share a news and you think,
what's the ripple effect?
what is the ripple effect? And it is the question. Because you might think, okay, what harm am I doing? And I'm just sharing, or it's just reporting and pressing. But if you look at the ripple effect, you look at the consequences and the implication, you would think twice or even three times before you share this, because people's life could be on the line. People's life could be endangered because of one single action you've done. And especially as young people, some of us are young people, all of us are young people, we also have been indicted in this particular instance because we tend to just take and forward as received without verifying. And that's a very big, dangerous situation.
Okay, so looking at the concerns and how this is affecting the country as a whole, let's look at the speed and the accuracy at which this information goes. One thing that stands out is how fast information spreads these days. It goes really fast. Just like you mentioned,
Yes.
the AI, the artificial intelligence has also not made it easy, because let's look at the deep fake. Deep fake has made things even more difficult. You know, you see a replica of what the original is supposed to be and is justified. It's very real. It takes your sense of understanding of what artificial intelligence is for you to be able to tell the
Decipher
difference.
if it's real or not.
If it's real or not. So all of those things are sometimes, when it comes to breaking news, at the speed of light, fake news, or what's it called, bad news travels really fast.
Very fast.
And then when the breaking news comes out, for us, what we do is, like I said, we need to verify to be sure what comes out. And then when this news goes out, it becomes a challenge, because online, before it is properly verified, it has gone haywire. And you're asking, do you think this demand of speed is actually affecting accuracy? Because it's one thing to have the speed of delivery, is another thing for the information that's going to have to be accurate, so it doesn't cause chaos where it's going to land.
Well, I think it's very important to strike a balance, because, like you said, with breaking news, it's best broken as it happens in real time. But in the quest to break the news, you ask yourself which is more important, because as, let's say, as journalist example, they tell you accuracy is one that you cannot compromise. Factuality is one that you cannot compromise.
Sure.
So even in the need for you to break the news and to be the first to report it as it happens, is it real? Is it true? So accuracy is something that for me should be prioritized. But then again, if you're prioritizing accuracy and you want to also involve speed, it's fine. But make sure you find a balance. Finding a balance by looking at the right channels and the right sources for these news stories before they go, especially with the perception on social media, basically.
And also in situations like that where misinformation spreads quickly, we also want to find out who should take responsibility, the platforms, the journalists, or the users. Basically, these are questions I always want to ask questions, but the good enough that our guest will join us, or he's actually right now back on the virtual transmission with us, basically to speak to this issue, because I talked about holding people accountable, so I want to hear his perspective. Hello, Mohammed, it's good to have you join us back on Global Morning Discussion at this hour. Sorry about the network glitches there. I totally understand what it is. But let's get back to the discussion. We want to understand, you are responding now with the new media and news consumption.
Yes, I was my sincere apologies for the network. Of course, these are things that so long as you're in the third world, you continue to face. The whole drive, as I was saying about social media, is now that we're able to have faster news, we're able to um, get live content, as it were. But just like I was saying, the drivers also come with its own consequences. The issues around misinformation, disinformation, and fake news are the major consequences that accompany the drive to this new era that we are in, the age of social media or new media, as some of us would like to call it. It's an important drive because we cannot not embrace it. But just like I just said, it has also come with consequences that uh, can be sometimes far-reaching because of the manipulation of the social media by institutions, by individuals and organizations who would, one way or the other, want to use these platforms to their own advantage, as against what it should be meant for, a populist kind of a medium where we democratize, as it were, information far much more than we used to have it before now.
Tara will quickly ask you these questions when it comes to the users and misinformation.
Thank you very much for that undertone you said. You talked about responsibility and how all of us have got to be stakeholders. So, in your own opinion, who should take responsibility for this? Is it the journalist? Is it the civil society, or even the individuals themselves? Who should be held accountable in terms of spreading this news, being accurate, and all of that?
Well, you see, sometimes when we embrace new technologies, we seldom want to do the right thing. I give you an example. For instance, in the 50 states that you have in the United States, I think about 47 of them have got social media regulations. I remember here in Nigeria, when attempts were made at regulating the social media space, the civil society, which I'm a part of, came out vehemently, to antagonize the move. But it is important for us to know that when we have platforms like this, there are always going to be people that would want to manipulate, those platforms for their own advantage. And so what I'm trying to get at is simple, that it is important that when you have a space like this, you have regulations for them. The state in itself, the state exists primarily to provide regulations, to institutions. To go back directly to your question, when there is disinformation or misinformation, and a journalist, for instance, or an individual spreads fake news or spreads misinformation, the individual should take full responsibility of it. So if I come on the social media, for instance, and I spread a very terrible news, a fake one that has no basis, no credibility, and people consume it and people act upon it, and maybe because of the misinformation or fake news or disinformation, whatever the case is, that I have spread, and 2-3 persons die, or 2-3 persons go do something that they shouldn't do, then I should take responsibility for it. The state should make sure that I take responsibility for it. Of course, in the mainstream media, the good thing these days is that even mainstream, those of you in the mainstream media or in the traditional media, as we call it, have also taken to social media, right? You've got editors, etc., etc. So if I report for Global TV, for instance, and I spread fake news or misinformation, and my editor, who is supposed now, is supposed to make sure that whatever it is that I'm putting out there is genuine, allows me to put it out there, then in that case, the institution would take responsibility for it because I didn't act alone in that instance.
So I get your point, and I like the fact that you had to break this down because it has to do with gatekeeping in the media space and how accountability should be from the point of the reporter to the editors and then to the final gatekeeper who checkmates the information that goes out. But let's talk about trust. Some people now trust social media more than the traditional news platforms because they feel it gives them fast information, but they don't think about accuracy. What do you think led to that shift happening with what we have today?
The issue about trust boils down to the issue of credibility of those in the mainstream media. Um, I ordinarily, as an individual, if I see something on the social media, I would have to either fact check and verify the information before I consume it or before I hold it as a source or something, right? Um, it is important for us to know that if I need to trust a source, because the good thing about social media, as it is today, is that um, it is everywhere. People are just able to come online, say whatever it is they want to say, and then people trust it. It is because the thinking of the ordinary person, you know, is that those in the mainstream media has been so they've been bought and sold, right? Um, in when we study in class the politics of the mass media, we're told that um, there is no media house that is not pro something. Every media house is established because of a purpose. And because of that, it gives some lowering credibility, compared to somebody who comes online and dishes out information that, in the eye of the person who is receiving the information, the person has nothing to gain or lose. So, unless those within the mainstream media are able to say that they are pro people or that the information that they are giving out is, not carrying any undertone. There is no political undertone. There is no interest. There's no biases or sentiments. Then people are able to trust more. But as it were, people would trust those people spraying out content on the social media, sometimes far much more than they would trust the mainstream media. And I think this is wrong anyway.
So I like the fact that you've just broken down. Mukhtar was about following up on that particular mindset.
You mentioned about how that trust is becoming something that's eroding. So, with what we've seen, do you think traditional media can also regain its trust, or has that landscape changed? Has that ship sailed, or can we still say traditional media would get trust above social media as it is right now?
Well, you see, for me, um, I trust traditional media 100 times much more than any information I get on the social media. Especially, this is why I talked about verification and fact checking, because the way the traditional media is set up, um, there's always some sort of gatekeeping. People will not come out and just say whatever it is they want to say. It has to go through some sort of editorial management, as it were. And so, um, the traditional media today, for many people who follow the trend, um, have got more trust in the eyes of those who have to verify, far much more than those on social media, right? Because if I see something on the social media and I don't verify it, I don't see today, for instance, in the instance of Nigeria, if news stations, traditional news stations, right, maybe Arise channels or any other mainstream media that we have are not, reporting on that matter, I would not take it as fact, right? And that is why till today, we still talk about having people make sure that they, as much as they can, verify information and fact check whatever it is that they see on social media. Um, I'm currently teaching a class called New Media and Literacy. It's an Erasmus program of a consortium of 6 universities. One of the major things that we're talking to people about basically is the fact that it is important that in today's age that people would have to verify information that they see on social media or they see anywhere else. And so for me, I don't think that the traditional media has lost its trust. The traditional media has lost its trust, in some quarters. For some people, who do not take fact checking very seriously. But the traditional media remains, for me, the best source of information and the most verified source of information that I consume.
So I want to say thank you for still counting on us, the traditional media. That gives us a lot of confidence to keep doing what we do. Of course, we put out a lot, and that's what people don't know. A whole lot of research work, a lot of findings before we come out, put out. So it's good that you still bank on us for that. Thank you so much for that. But let's turn our focus a bit and look at where, with the new media, we've had the content creators come into play. We also have influencers who also carry out this information where they see, and we know people, when they look up to individuals who are influencers, who are celebrated in their own way in delivering this thing, they just believe what they see because these are people they see as role model. We're also seeing that content creators and influencers are becoming a major source of information. How significant is their role today in information consumption and management of this information for verified source?
You see, thank you for that question because it's a fantastic question. The whole concept of citizen journalism is that there is this idea of democratizing the idea of democratizing news. Content creators create content most times. When they do this content creation, they sometimes or most times do it as a revenue generating stream for themselves. And when I am generating content to make money from it, it becomes a problem to the credibility of what it is that I'm putting out there. And that is why it is important. And I think I started this conversation with giving an instance where I said that in the United States of America, and we like to quote the United States because we always seem to look at it as some sort of model, for us to copy. There is social media regulation, for God's sake. If you want to have people generate content and people put out content, then just the way you have Bond regulating what goes on in the mainstream media, then you should also have to have some sort of legislation, that, regulate the content, as it were, that social media influencers, try to put out there. So, for instance, if you go back to some of the protests or some news that you've had at some point, in this country, you would see that social media influencers readily put out fake news, and people consumed it, right? For instance, during the NSAS, we had situations where people took clips from movies and then churned them out, and then people thought that these, were incidences that had just happened, during the NSAS protest, and those escalated the protest further. So there is a need to regulate what social media, social influences or social media influences, churn out. That way, we're able to know that anybody who's putting out anything, on the internet has some sort of credibility to what it is that they are putting out there.
Thank you very much. Now, we've seen cases where spreads and it tends to cause confusion. You mentioned the NSAS. So, how serious is the impact of misinformation in today's world?
Very terrible, right? Misinformation is worse than propaganda, right? Misinformation or disinformation, however you want to look at it, equals to churning out something that is not genuine. And when you are misinforming people, you are invariably, in some quarters trying to cause some sort of schism in that society. And I think that it's important, like I have said earlier, that we should have a way that we regulate what people put out in such a way that people are unable, or it becomes difficult for people to put out things that are not authentic or things that are not genuine, so that we don't cause a schism, in our communities.
Well, I like what you've put out, and I hope that people tend to understand how the gravity of misinformation and the need for them to sit up and do the right thing. And let's put it, why we look at people, let's look at why do people share information without verifying it in the first place? That's one question I always ask. Is it just to talk about the speed, or is it something deeper, or is it to cause chaos? Because I'm wondering why you're not sure of something and you're putting it out, and you know that people will also consume this. Why would people always have that kind of mindset?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't know why people turn out content that are not verified. With these smartphones, right? You have an information at your disposal, right? And whether you know it, whether it is true or it is not true, whether you verified it or not, you just forward it to somebody else, right? Um, and when you forward it to somebody else, just the way you forward it to the person will also do the same, right? It is a fundamental problem as I look at it. I look at it as a fundamental problem. It is why people have been able, to spread hate speeches. People have been able to spread, fake news. People have been able to misinform people because somebody is sitting down somewhere who's got a smartphone. That's the simplest thing you need. Who's got a smartphone to just send you messages that are not verified either by him or by any institution or by any verified source, right? There are individuals that, by the position they occupy in the state, they become some sort of authorities. So you don't see these informations from those kinds of people. You don't see these informations, from media houses. You don't see these informations from anywhere. People just begin to send broadcast messages, and you're sitting down, somebody's saying this is happening somewhere, and then you're just forwarding it all around, and people are just consuming it. So I think it's also the fact that it is so fast for people to do, right? I have a smartphone. I can just send you anything I want to send you, whether solicited or unsolicited, and then you just consume it. It is why we have to go back to the foundation in the first instance, that when we have social media regulations, if I know that this thing is not true and I send it to somebody and it goes somewhere and causes some sort of schism, I know that I have to come back and face the full wrath of the law, then I'll not do it. But if I know that it is just a free space, it's like a football pitch, right? And I can move from one place to another, unhindered. And if I know that I can move unhindered, there's no reason why I should not, play the ball to any corner of the pitch that I want to play it to, right? Unless we have a referee. In this instance, the referee is the regulation that we're going to have to guide the space. If we don't have that, then there's going to be, this problem is just going to persist.
Thank you very much. That's quite an insight. I would like for us to bring this to the area of responsibility. What do you think is, what roles do individuals play in ensuring that information that they share and they consume is accurate? What roles do they have to play in that regard?
And even basically, so you just wrap it up for us. What are some simple habits people can adopt to avoid spreading misinformation, basically, because we want to find that balance across this?
So basically, you have to identify the source, right? It's important to identify the source whenever you see anything on the internet, right? So long as I see it on the internet, and so long as I see that it is not from a verifiable source, then there's a problem at the foundational level of that information. You have to also look at, there are ways you look at metadata. On a picture, for instance, you can look at the metadata. If you see the picture, you can there are AIs everywhere that you can put those pictures to, and they generate the metadata for you. So they tell you that this picture was from the 1980s or it's from just yesterday. You are able to know, that this information that is put out there is not genuine. You can also cross-check the information that you have with other credible sources, for God's sake, right? I see this information on Mr. A's platform. I will just go check credible outlets. I check media outlets or check any other credible space where I might find information. And if I don't see this same information on those platforms, I know that, for instance, it might not be true. So these are just very simple ways of verifying, because it is important at the heart of this conversation, at the heart of misinformation, disinformation, and fake news, that fact checking and source verification is as important as the information itself. If we don't do it, we allow the streets, for further schism.
Follow up to that, because I like the way you break things down for people to understand that. I like the part where you mentioned the referee. Maybe we'll turn it to a football game where we need to have referees navigate through or give us directives to how to move about this through the penalty measures set in place. Let's look at going ahead. Where do you see news consumption going, following the trend of things? Or are we moving towards a more informed society or a more confused one? Because since social media is not having that regulation, kind of like the example you gave with the United States, who have a lot of things put in place to checkmate what goes out for people's consumption.
You see, very unfortunately, we're in the 21st century where people are supposed to be more informed. Very unfortunately, as I said, people are more disinformed than they were some 10, 20 years back, right? Because people just consume whatever it is that they see, right? And so it is important that as we grow, individuals, institutions are able to, at every point in time, try to verify information whenever they see them. Because in this age of social media, where we have anybody and everybody, churning out news, everybody is now a source of news. Everybody is some sort of phone analyst. Everybody, so long as you have a smartphone, you are able to just do your own analysis, whether you are informed or not informed, right? And so it is important that as we age, right? As we age, we have to, verify information whenever we see them, because the heart of the conversation is that verification is more as important as the news itself.
We like that questions, basically, the way you've put out that, and we look forward to more engagement and seeing that this works out fine. Thank you so much for your time with us. And going forward, we hope that Nigerians understand what it means to have verified information, being consumed, and so it avoids us getting into chaotic situations where people consume the wrong thing and it ends up costing one's life in the long run, because sometimes some information that are not verified gets people into trouble. I've seen situations where this is not about even the social media, it's about the physical thing, where you see somebody running and you're not asking what happened, you're just joining the race. and you're running for, first thing first that comes to your mind is safety, because you're not even sure of what is happening behind you or what's happening in front of you. All you're looking for is, let me get safe first. Thank you so much for your time with us, ISAH Mohammed, for your wonderful contributions to this, and we really appreciate your time with us. Johnson of News Mukhtar.
Honestly, that was a very informed masterclass.
Yes, it
And,
was.
I think going forward now, with the insights he has shared, people are better informed as to their ethics and their conduct with regards to news, how they share it, how they perceive it, and what they do with information that they get. It's been a very wonderful conversation.
Well, this is a very good way to say that. So, what question we should ask basically most times when people ask why are we speaking about this issue is, what is the one mindset shift people need to make when it comes to breaking out or consuming information today? That's one thing he has cleared. You need to verify first. Verify whatever information gets to your table, because like we said, you see a lot of forwarded messages. As you're forwarding, one thing I know about life is when something gets to one person,